Okay, well, I'm going to officially get us started. So, hi, folks. My name is Fred Polander. I am the Assistant Director for Career Development and Experiential Learning for the College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences. And thank you so much for those of you that are in the room with us and for the folks on Zoom. These career talks are an effort to kind of give you real context on different industries, different job opportunities. And Alex Lopez is joining us from DOGAMI, which is such a great name for an acronym. I'm surprised origami wasn't picked. If an origami,
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's one of the better acronyms. You can actually pronounce it. It doesn't have any awkward. Yeah.
So I met Alex at a career fair a while back. Plug for career fairs. Please attend those. You're going to meet wonderful people like Alex who are promoting what their organizations do. Alex has come to us today from Portland, so thanks for making the long drive down here. And as part of a representative of a state agency, I'm just really grateful for your time to do with us today. So I'm going to let Alex take it from there, and I'll be here with the Q&A. Here we go.
Excellent. Thank you, Fred. Yeah, thanks everybody for showing up, making space for this conversation. Especially thank you, Fred, for kind of setting things up and all of that, kind of figure out the scope of what we're going to talk about and all of that. Like Fred mentioned, I put this together. There are some slides. They're mostly a slideshow with pictures. I really want this to be kind of conversational. I'm going to be talking a little bit about kind of my career, how I got to where I am, kind of maybe a non-traditional geologist route. Then I'll talk a bit about just our state agency, what we do, kind of how we're structured, a little bit of give you all a little picture of kind of what DOGAMI looks like. And then I'll wrap it up with kind of the things I've learned in my too long career about jobs in geology and public versus private sector and things like that. So, yeah, so once again, my name is Alex Lopez. I'm the Public Affairs Coordinator for the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. That is a communications role. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about what I do in a little while, but I am actually a registered geologist in Oregon and Washington. I got my registration, my licensure with the state, I think in 2006, 2007. So I've been doing that licensed work in Oregon for and Washington for quite some time. Next slide, please. All right. These are some old embarrassing pictures of me from various points in my career. I wanted to put this in here though, because what you do at work is not just what you do for 8 hours a day. A lot of times you meet folks there, you kind of have adventures. One of the things I think is really cool about this is we've got Adams, Oregon, these two, Beaverton, Oregon, Grants Pass. I believe that is Medford or White City area, and I believe this is Bellingham here. So, I've had the opportunity to kind of go all over the place, and it's been really cool. So I just wanted to kind of demonstrate that. Obviously, I'm much younger in these pictures than I am now. So I grew up in Houston, Texas, so far away from here, but I had a grandmother who was constantly bringing me rocks back from Mexico when she went to Mexico, and I had a mom who was very science focused. And so as soon as I graduated from high school, I ended up at the University of Texas studying both math and geophysics. I ended up getting 2 bachelor's degrees from there. After graduating, I ended up working for the University of Texas Institute for Geophysics. Really cool job. We were doing marine seismic reflection work, so very geophysics oriented. I was a seismic data processor. But I actually had the opportunity to go out on a seismic cruise and collect a bunch of data in the Lesser Antilles forearc. We were imaging the accretionary wedge that formed at that little subduction. So it's super cool stuff. But it was grant funded, and eventually the grant funding ran out, and I found myself unemployed, and I ended up moving back to Houston. And this is somewhere where I'd like to mention there's a little bit of an element of right place, right time when you're kind of starting out your career, when you're looking for jobs. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but right place, right time, but you have some control over that. So I just want to kind of make that clear. part of that right place, right time, when I got to Houston, I got picked up by ExxonMobil pretty quickly. And that was because of the experience I had at the University of Texas. So it was this confluence of ending up back in Houston, which is sort of the oil and gas exploration hub, one of the hubs in the world, and having the appropriate experience there. But I got picked up pretty quickly by Exxon. I was working for ExxonMobil Exploration Company, it was a very interesting job. I'll just put it that way. But I was doing kind of this hybrid of kind of technical computing and geophysics. So I was kind of helping out I worked with geophysical data and made sure that the data that was collected in the field was actually loaded appropriately into the systems for analyzing those data for the exploration work. So really an interesting thing to do. It helped me build technical skills, helped me build communication skills. And as much as ultimately that wasn't my chosen career path, the experiences and frankly some of the reputation that followed me from working and being recruited from Exxon actually helped me out significantly in my later career. At about 5 years, I was just kind of under the realization that this was not where I wanted to go with my life. And that also would have entailed staying in Houston where I grew up, and I was really wanting to get away. And so a friend of mine worked for an environmental consulting firm and said, "Hey, we've got a job open in Portland, you should apply." And lo and behold, I got the job and moved up here around 2005. So the environmental work was really all about remediation of petroleum contaminated properties. That's where it started. So gas stations, other places where you have an underground storage tank with diesel fuel in it and that sort of thing. It was essentially an entry level position where I was doing a lot of field work. I sampled a lot of soil and a lot of groundwater in the pouring cold rain. But I will say that I'll talk about this again a little more later on. Foundational experience. I mean, without that knowledge, I would have no idea really how, it's kind of the basic building block on which a lot of my career has been built. Also learned a lot about environmental regulations. That's kind of boring and nerdy, and it totally is, but it also helped quite a bit. And then technical writing. I've written so many technical papers. If you would have told me in college that I was going to be writing that many papers, I probably would have changed my major. But that's besides the point. It's a great experience, and I know how to write things now, which is really great. Eventually, I was promoted to project manager, so I learned all about project management. And then, kind of the last step in here is that, and this really has guided the rest of my career, I really saw a lot of environmental injustice happening. And so as the person who was kind of organizing cleanup projects, I saw firsthand that the company that did the polluting has an army of geologists and engineers and lawyers to argue for them. And the state regulators a lot of times have armies of geologists and engineers arguing their point. But these contaminated properties are like in neighborhoods, right? So this is in people's backyards, like right next to their houses. And a lot of times there was no avenue for those folks to get involved, much less, I mean, sometimes they didn't even know that these things were happening, and that just struck a chord with me. So as I progressed on in the environmental cleanup world, I ended up doing some volunteer work for an environmental justice nonprofit in the Portland area. It's called Groundwork Portland at the time, and it was focused on brownfields properties. So these properties that are not super contaminated maybe, but that still have some work that needs to be done on them. And communities a lot of times just had no idea what to do with them. So this nonprofit would go into communities, talk to folks, do some community organizing, get ideas of what the community envisioned for these properties, and then build capacity within those communities to advocate for themselves with the state of Oregon or whoever is responsible for the cleanup of those. Really cool work, really hard work. Getting contaminated properties cleaned up is hard when there's money. A lot of these brownfields that we were working on, the company that polluted them no longer exists. So who's going to spend $300,000 cleaning it up. But fantastic experience. So eventually I kind of wound my way through a few consulting jobs. Finally ended up starting my own business. So I've actually been a small business owner myself. I opened my own environmental consulting firm. That was a formative and very challenging part of my career. Kudos to anybody who owns their own business. It is incredibly challenging. Great work. It was not for me. In the end, it was really competitive and very marketing oriented. I mean, for a good year, all I did was put on business casual and walk into every real estate office I could find, offering to look for heating oil tanks. It was a lot. But for me, it was not really sustainable in the long term. But it also made me realize that my motivation was less in the technical aspects of the cleanup projects and more in the community focus. Like I was way more interested in kind of ensuring that communities actually had access to the tools that they needed to be able to advocate for themselves in these situations. So ended up taking it was a pretty big leap of faith, and I went to social work school for my master's degree. It wasn't as out of the blue as that sounds. The nonprofit I was working with, the director of that, is a social worker. And I think a lot of times when you hear social work, you think about individual counseling or family counseling, that sort of thing. There's a whole other branch of social work called macro social work, where you actually do the same kind of processes that you do with an individual, but you do it on a community level. So I went into grad school for social work and focused on environmental justice and kind of natural hazards and how those things impact communities. Got a great reception from my social work program. Everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, nobody ever wants to talk about that stuff." So it was actually a great experience doing the social work thing. And when I got out, it really helped me to connect that geology piece, that environmental geology piece, with that community focused piece. So when I graduated, I actually had a couple of social work jobs. I actually ran the Clackamas County Food Bank at one point, which was during the COVID times. Great experience. I have so much respect for folks who work in food supplement and nutritional supplementation for communities, because that is so hard. I can't stress you how physically and emotionally and mentally demanding that was. But yeah, it just really helped me to connect that community piece with the technical piece. So yeah, after I graduated with my master's degree, I went back and actually worked for that same nonprofit again. This time, their focus had switched to working on the cleanup of the Portland Harbor in Portland. So big stretch, actually 10.8 miles of contaminated river. The Willamette River going through downtown Portland is extremely contaminated. And so this nonprofit works with communities to make sure that houseless communities, low-income communities, Black and Brown and Indigenous communities actually have a seat at the table when the decisions are being made about how this cleanup is going to happen. Really tough work again, but super rewarding. That's where I was working when I got a call from a friend of mine who actually we were both volunteering for NAACP at the time, but he called up and said, "DOGAMI's got this position. I think you'd be really good at that. It kind of lines up with your experience." So I took a look at it, and lo and behold, it was great. I interviewed for it and was accepted, and really cool place to work. So just in short, public affairs coordinator, and what I do is there's media relations. I coordinate our publications. So we're a scientific research agency, and we put out papers that have been internally reviewed, and I coordinate all of that. Community engagement and outreach, like this, development of outreach materials. I coordinate and facilitate our public meetings that we have. Website administration, this is a huge list. Coordination with state agencies, and then I do things that are actually specific to geoscience projects that we're doing. So for example, we're working on looking at geologic carbon sequestration, which is the process by which you take carbon dioxide out of the air and actually put it down into the ground. But in Oregon, our Columbia River basalts are geochemically such that, in fact, when you put carbon dioxide into them, they actually crystallize and turn into minerals down there and remain locked in the rock. So really cool process. So I do outreach and engagement like specifically related to that type of thing as well. Okay, next slide, please. I'll stop there. I mean, all that was about me, but any questions at this point?
Alex, when you did that long material interview, you talk about, so with the environmental justice nonprofit.
Yeah.
How did you kind of get that established, that volunteer opportunity?
Let's see, that would have been around 2011, 2012. I know I did some poking around and actually interviewed with a number of different nonprofits who kind of guided me to the appropriate place to go. You know, nonprofit work is many times poorly funded. The folks who work at those nonprofits they work very hard and sometimes not for a lot of compensation. So it was hard to find them. But so I interviewed at a couple places, just informational interviews. And that's actually really important because one of the things I talk about a little later is exploring opportunities and being open-minded about stuff. And so it started probably with a couple of internet searches and then a couple of phone calls. Then I sat down with a few people and folks pointed me in the right direction. Like, oh, it sounds like you would work with Cassie. Well, that's how I ended up there.
And how broadly, geographic space-wise, were you looking? Were you willing to go 50 miles out, or?
Probably not. I mean, first of all, I was in Portland, so there's ample environmental nonprofits in Portland. But I also, I lived and worked in Portland, so it would have been hard for me to kind of play the same role going very far outside of the Portland area. Yeah.
Okay. But it took a lot of building relationships. People and getting referrals.
Yeah. And I still volunteer with that organization. So I mean, this has been over going on 15 years of relationship building. So it is very much about the relationship building piece. All right, let's see. So I wanted to, so that was all about me. But I wanted to talk a little bit about geology and mineral industries. So up here, we've got our kind of mission statement. So we want to increase the understanding of Oregon's geologic resources and hazards through science and stewardship. And we provide our science information and regulation to make Oregon safe and prosperous. And so we try to kind of inject that into everything that we do. Our agency was established. In fact, I think the first incarnation of our agency, don't hold me to this there. Didn't get a chance to actually look it up. But I believe the first incarnation of our agency was like 1937. So it's an agency with a long history. We've got a lot of data that we've collected during that time. A lot of it is actually available on our website. So, but yeah, we were established by Oregon Revised Statutes 516, 517, 520, 522, and 523. Those are the actual laws that were passed that formed our agency and gives us direction and also established our regulatory authority for mining and extractive industries in the state. Okay, next slide. All right. So this is it's complicated. There's a lot of information on here, and I also realize it's not the easiest thing to read, unfortunately. We're working on that. But this is the broad organization of the agency. The thing that is not on here is that above the top of this is actually a governing board. So like many state of Oregon agencies, like Water Resources Department of Fish and Wildlife, we are actually overseen by a governing board that's made up of citizens of the state. Those citizens are also they apply for the position. They are vetted through the governor's office and the agency, and then they're actually appointed officially by the legislature. But there's a governing board that makes all of the kind of big picture decisions for the agency. So they're on top. Then we have a director. The director's name is Rory Day Sterrett. he is also the Oregon State geologist and my boss. So, let's see, underneath that, we've got two programs, and I'll go into detail about these programs shortly, but the Geological Survey and Services and then the Mineral Land Regulation and Reclamation programs. Here are the kind of major tasks for each of those. And you can't quite see it at the down at the bottom. We've got LiDAR mapping and remote sensing that really forms the basis of kind of most of the things that we do as an agency. LiDAR and GIS is in almost everything that we do. Okay, next one. Oh yeah.
A question online, if we could just jump in.
Yeah.
Is there any environmental concerns about the crystallization of the basalts?
That is, so what we are working on right now is a feasibility study, essentially with respect to geologic carbon sequestration. So we are studying that, starting out with drilling, reservoir modeling. Eventually, if all of those initial phases look good, we'll move on to a pilot injection. But that's actually part of what we're evaluating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, next slide, please. All right, so this is our strategic plan. Again, these are just pictures to read that. But this is the document that our governing board, along with our leadership team, put together and I think it's every 6 years we put one of these together. And it really guides our agency. So it's, how we do the things we do. We've got our general information up here. We've got our equity statement down there, but talks about all the different ways that we do our work and that we interact with the community. So we go back to this all the time. One of the basic things that guides the agency. As I mentioned, two programs, the Geological Survey and then the regulatory arm as well. And all of that falls underneath this strategic plan. In general, and I won't talk about budgeting too much because it's totally boring, but like most state agencies, we are funded by the legislature, and so we are on the same legislative calendar. And so we're constantly in this process that the Oregon's legislature is on a 2-year biennium. And so we're in a constant state of kind of revising and looking at new budget items and kind of going through that process. Every 2 years, the legislature actually votes on our budget to actually fund the agency for the next biennium. So that's just a little insight on how funding works from the legislative side. Yeah. Any basic? Well, I'll pick. Any basic questions about the agency? Yeah.
If you the DOGAMI, the structure with the group of citizens above your boss and the people above you, who are those people? And are they just like random citizens? Are they paid for their role? Why do they do it?
That's like a fantastic question. Right now, we've got a coastal citizen. We've got a couple of folks from the Portland area. They're actually all kind of listed out on our website, and they have tenure, so they have a time limited tenure. So there's a period of time that they are on the board, and then they move on, and we have more folks on there. So it's kind of changing. Sometimes there are industry folks on there. Sometimes there are folks from more environmental fields on there, but it kind of goes back and forth. And not everyone has the same kind of time frame. So I think right now we've got 5 governing board members, and they kind of go on and off. But yeah, if you go on our website, there's a whole about us section that outlines who our governing board members are. We're in a little bit of a transition place right now, so I'm not exactly sure how many folks have been approved to be on the board and not. So yeah, it is ever changing. The board is not compensated, and this is the same for a lot of state of Oregon boards and commissions, is that these are essentially volunteer positions. The DOGAMI governing board meets every once a quarter, so we have big long meetings every quarter. Yeah. Did I get it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Do they apply and get vetted by other board members, or
They,
how are they appointed?
they apply. So in fact, at the end of the presentation, I've got a QR code that will take you to the State of Oregon Jobs website. And actually those boards and commission openings are listed on the website. So if you look through the available jobs, you will see governing board of the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries there as something that you can apply.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's take a look.
Yeah.
I'd love to see the qualifications. So
Yeah, in fact, I don't actually know the qualifications for that, but we really, this is the citizen group and this is one of our connections to the communities in Oregon. So we want to have broad geographic representation. We want to have diverse representation, and that just helps us to understand what is important to communities and what we can do to kind of support communities in the work that we do. All right. Okay, next slide. All right, so I will start with the Geological Survey and Services and do a little bit of a deep dive here. This is our geological survey. These are some of our cool products that we make. I'm not going to talk in depth about them, but on the left is our geologic history. This is a little bit out of date, but this is Ian Maiden made this product really fantastic. It's actually this is a portion of it. It is a giant poster that we've got in our office, and really fantastic. This is actually one of our newer products that is a LiDAR derived product, and we created a bunch of desktop images for folks to download and use as desktop photos. It's got some information about what you're seeing. This is the Elkhorn Mountains and the Baker Valley out in Eastern Oregon. But I really like this stuff. It's really fun to do. So as I mentioned, the Geological Survey really focuses on the research side of things. So things like geologic mapping, collection of historic mining information. And I think I mentioned earlier the geologic carbon sequestration. So we've actually got a new focus area in the survey called decarbonization geoscience, which is all about things like geologic carbon sequestration, geologic hydrogen, geothermal, and critical elements, critical minerals. So the things that are to address climate change and really to look at that decarbonization and transition away from fossil fuels. Next slide, please. So then we also have a big group of people who work on geologic hazards. So earthquakes, flooding and channel migration. On the coast, we're looking at tsunamis, earthquake impacts, as well as coastal erosion. And then we've got landslides and also some volcanic hazards as well, like lahars. I will say for the volcano hazards, we really rely on USGS Cascade Volcano Observatory. Those folks do a fantastic job. And so we kind of piggyback on their expertise as it relates to volcanoes. But yeah, and again, for all of these things, you can kind of tell some of these are based on LiDAR and digital elevation models, and that's how we do a lot of our work is kind of with the basis of that GIS and LiDAR information. I didn't have room to put any in the slideshow, but mapping landslides with LiDAR is just it's really cool, and it's really advanced our landslide hazards program. We've got an expert, Bill Burns, who is widely recognized as an expert in the field. So really a dynamic place and really awesome to work with a bunch of scientists doing fantastic work. Next question. Oh yeah.
do you get phone calls from citizens who are concerned about like the big earthquake we're going to get at the Cascade Subduction Zone?
Yeah.
Are you with the name and geology in the name?
Oh, yeah.
We get a lot of questions.
We get so many questions. So as the public affairs coordinator, one of my duties is to a triage calls that we get and emails for different kinds of information that we get. We get a lot of, I found a meteorite in my backyard, or I think there's a dinosaur bone in my backyard. But we also get, I think there's a sinkhole forming. What do I do? I think there might be a landslide happening below my property. What do I do? And yeah, it's a challenge sometimes because a lot of times we're limited in capacity of what we can do, and we do get inundated sometimes, particularly if there's a big storm that causes a lot of landslides. That gets out into the news, and then we get phone calls about it. But yeah, we do our best to try to answer questions from the general public. That's one of the services that we offer. I will mention actually before I have to. One of the things that we do for landslides, so this is just an example, we work with the National Weather Service, and when they put out a flood warning that includes language about potential landslides and debris flows, we actually turn around and put out a press release as well. And then the news calls, and so then we do news interviews. So you may actually see Bill Burns on the news every once in a while actually talking about landslides across the state. So yeah. Okay, next slide. So how do we get our stuff out there? So, we do a lot of research, we do a lot of work in the state of Oregon. How do we actually get that information out there? This is one of our outreach products. I will show the postcards again. We've got our postcards here. This is actually the Willamette River in the Central Valley. I should have looked up the exact location. I apologize, but these are the paleo channel for the Willamette River in the Central Valley that have been kind of highlighted by LiDAR. So we actually have printed these up. They're really beautiful posters. I actually have one hanging in my house that's really awesome. Well, I don't have any of those to get out here, but this is part of our strategy for actually getting information out there into the community. We also have our publications. So online, we've got our publications database that has all of our different geoscience publications out there. We have our GIS and mapping services portion of our website that actually uses GIS to plug some of this data in to communities in a way that is easily accessible. So for example, we have our what's called HazView, which is our geologic hazards viewer that allows folks to go in, put your address in, you can actually turn on the earthquake shaking layer or the landslide layer or the flooding layer or tsunami layer and kind of see where you fall in relation to that. So that's part of it. And then we do a lot of collaboration with other academic institutions, research groups, other state agencies. We work often with Water Resources, Department of Environmental Quality, federal agencies, and then every once in a while industry groups as well. So we do our best to make sure that the information we collect is actually available for scientists to use. Next slide, please. We also attend lots of conferences. This is actually my my poster from Geological Society of America in San Antonio last year. This is all about carbon storage, and since I do the community engagement for that, this was me describing how we go about our community engagement. So this is just an example of a poster that I presented at the Geological Society of America last year. So that's another thing. But we have folks that go to AASG, American Association of State Geologists. Gordon Conference is another one. American Geophysical Union is another one. So we have folks that actually go to these conferences and present our work there as well. Any questions online or in the room? Okay. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I meant to also add that we do other community engagement events as well. For example, I was telling Fred about this a little while ago. We actually go to the Creswell Arbor Day celebration. I have been doing that for a number of years now, and it's a small community with a little Arbor Day celebration. We were directly invited by them, and we've gone, and it's not a ton of people, but it's really great interactions with people. And I have gotten the feedback a couple of times that there are a bunch of kids in Creswell who want to be geologists now. And I think that is like the exact reason that I'm doing this work. That is like the coolest thing for me to hear. So all right, so I wanted to talk a little bit. Oh no, back to the event. Yeah, I messed up. wanted to talk a little bit about how our work is funded. So I mentioned earlier that, the legislature appropriates money for us, but we also have some work that we establish with other state agencies. So the carbon storage project is actually something that we're doing in conjunction with Department of State Lands. And that the money for that came from the Common School Fund, sort of a little complicated backstory there, but so that's an example of some of the work that we do among agencies. We also get some federal funding, so Federal Emergency Management Agency, cooperating technical partners grants, U.S. Department of Energy grants. They fund things like related to critical minerals, energy projects. Of course, U.S. Geological Survey, state map projects. So we also have federal funding partners as well. But I like this slide because this is a good. It kind of shows the feedback loop between communities and kind of the work that we do. So when we hear from communities that they need, for example, Clackamas County has experienced some landslides. They would like more information about how landslides impact their communities. They will call us. And so they come to us for the request. We work with them. We identify funding. Maybe that comes from FEMA or wherever. We actually do that science and then provide that information to those communities, which they then take and they can make policy decisions on that or use that however they see fit. And then if they come back to us and say, okay, now we need additional information, then we kind of start this cycle all over again. But it really is kind of a feedback with the community, and we try to be responsive to community needs in that way. So. All right. Next slide. All right, so that was the Geological Survey. The other program that we've got is the Mineral Land Regulation and Reclamation Program, and this is the regulatory side of the agency. So the Mineral Land I'm just going to say MLRR is what we call it internally, so we don't have to say the name. But it regulates and permits extractive industries in the state. So that includes surface mining, geothermal developments, oil and gas exploration and production. We actually do have one small natural gas field in Oregon. It's all the way up in Columbia County, up on the way to Astoria. We can come up along Highway 30. Actually, not along Highway 30, but in fact, at this point, I believe the natural gas that was naturally occurring has all been extracted, and now it is in fact used for storage of natural gas. So it's an underground reservoir. They pulled out the natural gas. Now it's kind of an underground tank. So they actually store natural gas in that, and then can pull that out when needed. And then chemical process mining. I'll talk about that in a little more detail here in a little bit. And then again, we also collect historical mining information in the state. So that's a place where kind of the two parts of the agency cross over is with that historical information and collecting that. And so those are the permitting activities that we do for industry. Next slide. We also do monitoring. So once a facility gets a permit, they are under permit conditions based on environmental regulation and rules. And so we will actually go out and do inspections of mine sites and other facilities. This was from an inspection in Morrow County, and then one of our staff members took this photo. Let's see. Yeah, and in the event that facilities are not abiding by permit conditions, we actually have power to implement fines and that sort of thing to ensure compliance with those. Again, part of our mission statement is safe and prosperous as well. So we do what we are empowered to do to ensure adherence to environmental standards and regulations.
Do you have a side hustle making postcards?
Yeah, I do not.
That could be a nice way to DOGAMI too.
I mean the stack of postcards. I'm going to make you take one of these stacks of postcards. The postcards are really great, and we've actually gotten great reception from the postcards. Yeah. They're good at getting the word out. I'll explain a little more of that a little later. Okay. So then the other piece of this is reclamation, which is the process by which a piece of land that has had extractive industry on it actually gets turned back into a usable land after that operation has concluded. And so reclamation plans are, and I don't work for this section, so I hope I'm not getting this too mixed up, but reclamation plans are generally a requirement when you are applying for a permit. So you need to be able to tell us, not only are you going to dig up, X number of cubic meters of material, but that when you are done with that, that you are actually going to return that piece of property to beneficial use. So this is just the establishing statutes for that, but don't read that. You don't certainly need to read all of that. But yeah, this is another way that we interface with local land use authorities, local jurisdictions about what happens on this land. So we do our best to, as we're going through this process, to work with local authorities when these types of projects are planned. I will say that just to throw one detail in there, generally it is local communities that decide the land use for things. So we get a lot of questions about, who made the final decision for this facility to be there. A lot of times it's actually that type of decision making rests in the local community, and then we come in afterwards and provide all the permitting and planning around these permits. So just really quickly, I talked about funding for the Geological Survey. For the regulatory portion of the agency, it's actually a significant portion is fee funded. So as opposed to coming out of taxpayer funds, most of the funding for the MLRR program actually comes from permitting fees that are associated with permit applications and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit different of a funding model there. We did actually raise fees for the first time in a number of years just recently in an effort to just make sure that we have enough capacity and staff to actually handle the volume of permits that we get in the agency. So, all right, next slide. Okay. All right, so I mentioned chemical process mining a little while ago. Right now, across the state, we are the primary commodity that is being mined is aggregate. So this is just rock that is pulled out of the ground, minimally processed, that goes into concrete and other infrastructure building materials. However, as you probably aware, we're in the West, there are other commodities out there, including gold and silver, and then we've got critical minerals. A lot of times those materials require significantly more processing, and that processing can actually be somewhat dirty, right? So you might have to use a cyanide wash to actually remove the commodity from the ore. So that requires a higher level of regulation. We operate under something called Division 37 rules, which is a whole other kind of framework for permitting for chemical process mines. Generally, those require us to coordinate with TQ, Water Resources, Health Authority, the State Historic Preservation Office to look at cultural resources that might be impacted by these facilities. And what the Division 37 rules do is allow DOGAMI, even though you need all of these other permits, we are the central permitting agency. So we work with all of the other agencies to kind of create the permits for these types of facilities. Grassy Mountain is the first one of these facilities that we've issued draft permits for under those Division 37 rules. This is a facility, this is Ontario. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar, but that is right on the Oregon-Idaho border. This is actually in the mountain time zone, so it's all the way to the other side of Oregon. And this proposed gold mine project is south of Vail. And I think it was in December, we just issued the draft permits for those. This was one of those situations where we actually went out and did a community hearing in the town of Vale out there. So that is also my responsibilities is interfacing with communities and trying to understand community concerns and kind of getting feedback on that traffic permitting process. Yeah. So this is kind of the first one, but you may have also heard about McDermott Caldera, where there's potentially a lithium deposit there that might be looked at as a resource at some point. So I would say if you're interested in that or mining type of thing, this actually comes directly from our website. All of this is a fully transparent public process. So all of the documents that have been submitted by the permittee are actually accessible on the website. So if you'd like to take a look, I encourage you to do that. So that's kind of my deep dive into the two different programs. Any questions about that stuff?
Community listening session that you described, are those open to the public? Are those announced in advance if students wanted to attend those just to see what it's?
They are. So a lot of the permitting that we do, particularly in the chemical process, well, actually all of the permitting that we do follow pretty strict rules related to, this has to be a public hearing, that has to be 30 to 60 days out from this particular milestone. But yes, all of those are advertised publicly. This was actually, I haven't taken it off the website yet, but this was the date of our public hearing. So on January 29th, we were out in Vale, and on our website, we have advertised the public notice. We have the press release there. You can't see it because there's an issue with that, but the agenda is also included in there. That one was in Vale. However, there was also a Zoom.
So I'd say there's the
Opportunity for that. So yeah, I would say if you're interested in some of these more technical processes, keep an eye on our website. We've got different public meetings up there, and the public is able to watch that. All right. Any other thoughts on the agency structure? Okay. All right, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about skills for public sector work. I will mention that a lot of this comes from my experience. This is just, really a result of the 20 whatever years that I've been working, kind of the things that I have learned. I do encourage everyone to find your own path in there. There's I talked about my career path, which was long and winding and took a whole bunch of unexpected turns. So, one of the things I really encourage folks to do is just be open-minded about that kind of stuff. But from my experience in the field, I'll start with the kind of hard science skills first, but just to start off and say that these are highly dependent on the position you're looking at, the agency or department or wherever you were looking, and then the stage of career that you're at. If this is going to look very different if you're a 15-year employee than if you're just coming out. So keep that in mind. But first on this list, or second on this list, is subject matter expertise. It kind of, I think, goes without saying, but if you're interested in doing work in mining, then taking all the classes you can in mining, kind of learning what you can about the industry. If you're interested in geologic mapping or mineralogy or geochemistry, doing that background work to make sure that when you do approach an employer that you've got that kind of base technical qualifications for that. I will make a plug for grad school a little bit. In here, I actually did not go to grad school until significantly later. I tell students all the time that's, it is, sometimes it's just not the right time. For me, it was absolutely not the right time to do it. I had gotten two technical undergraduate degrees and I was really burnt out, but by 5.5 years of undergraduate work, and it was not there for me the energy to do that was not there for me when I was just getting out of school. But I do encourage folks to look at advanced degrees. For example, at DOGAMI, we encourage folks with higher education or with advanced degrees to apply. I'm hesitant a little bit because I don't like to tell folks that that is necessary, because it's not. You know, I started my career in the geosciences before I got my master's degree. But it can lead to situations where, for example, you might not be able to advance as far as other folks. So I'm just trying to be real with y'all. I'm just gonna let you know what it really is like out there. We have quite a few PhDs in geology, for example, working at DOGAMI, and it's partly because we're a research institution and we need that higher level expertise. So I do want to encourage you, even if it may be something you're not looking at immediately after your undergraduate, to still think about an advanced degree as part of your education. Okay. Research methods just kind of goes along with the higher education or the advanced degrees piece, but it's really helpful to have a background in knowing how to do research, what questions to ask, how to organize your thoughts, how to, what resources are out there for doing research. So I highly encourage folks to just understand what geoscience research entails. If you're looking at geophysics, maybe understand some about downhole logging equipment, that sort of thing. Field methods is a big one. This was something that when I started out doing environmental consulting, like I mentioned, I was sampling lots of soil and groundwater in the rain. You kind of have to do that at the beginning. You got to get your feet wet, and it is challenging. It's not the most glamorous work. You will get dirty, but I'm a geologist. I don't mind that. So, but I would encourage you to look at, particularly if you're wanting to go into a discipline that requires the field collection of data to really understand how that field work works. GIS, I mentioned, those skills really underlie everything that we do. So it is, again, it's the way that we tie the data that we collect back into the community and provide that information in a way that the community can digest. GIS allows you also to do a lot of visualization that you might not be able to do, and to look at different data sets, and it's really, really incredibly powerful stuff. AI is kind of a burgeoning part of the work that we do. Of course, there's some caution with AI, right? And we at the agency, we've actually learned this by just working with AI tools. You have to double check everything, but especially as those tools are advancing and that technology is maturing, I would also encourage folks to just think about how AI can benefit you in geology and the geosciences as well.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the agency's been around for a very long time, and there's a lot of data from many, many years ago. So presumably some of that hasn't been quite digitized.
Some of it hasn't. There are things that have not been digitized. A large portion of it has.
Okay.
So there is a good amount of data that we've got online that it has been digitized.
Do you envision that with the AI tools that are available now, like OCR, I think that's like
Optical character recognition.
yeah, like that there might be more of a data warehouse capability with AI, and sort of see where that data could come to new analysis that wasn't possible before.
Absolutely. Yep. And that is we're not quite there yet. I don't think the tools are quite there yet, but we are moving in that general direction. I would also mention that the state, we are part of the state enterprise, right? So we're the Department of Geology, but there's all these other agencies and departments, and so we do have kind of an IT board that kind of governs IT usage for the whole state enterprise, and so sometimes, especially for big bureaucratic organizations like the state of Oregon, it is a challenge to get new tools approved for use and that sort of thing, and get appropriate use policies around that. So bureaucratic, but yeah. So we are working on it. Let's see what else. So I've got written communications down here. I mentioned I have written a bunch of technical papers. The more writing that you do, the easier it becomes, and frankly, that is one of the biggest pieces of what I do, is just crafting communication. So not just technical reports, but emails to constituents. Understanding the maybe different language barriers, maybe understanding kind of level of education and that sort of thing, and ensuring that the communications that you create are actually appropriate for the audience. So written communications are a big deal. And then finally, I've got statutes and regulations. Again, that might sound sound a little boring and bureaucratic, but understanding the regulatory landscape and understanding kind of the rules that everything is under can be hugely beneficial. And in fact, I think just from what I understand, that was part of what helped me get the job at DOGAMI, was that I had worked with state of Oregon environmental mineral regulations for many years. I can talk about Oregon revised statutes, Oregon administrative rules, and it really helps if you want to work in the public sector, to be able to kind of understand what it is the government does. So in addition to those hard skills, there are also the soft skills, things like organizing, verbal communications, interviewing. Obviously, you need that to get a job. Emotional intelligence. I struggled with whether or not to put that in there, but many times you're working with a diverse group of folks. You might be working in a situation that is got deadlines and pressure, both financial and time in it, and it really helps to be able to build relationships with your coworkers, and the emotional intelligence piece just helps to kind of smooth out some of the things that might become barriers otherwise. Work-life balance, that is always a struggle. This is, of course, not just for public sector work, but I frankly, I struggle with that myself. My plate is generally pretty full of work, and so knowing enough about yourself to know when to step and to when to take a break, and when to talk to folks about the fact that you have too much work to do, and that sort of thing. It's really important. And a lot of this stuff you're not going to know, especially right after you get out of school and in your first position. These are kind of skills that you would develop as well over time. Mentor-mentee relationships, kind of understanding that you will not know everything, and you will need to rely on coworkers and to help you kind of get your feet on the ground and sort of understand some of the more technical aspects of work, and being able to kind of be in those types of relationships kind of goes back to the emotional intelligence piece, but being able to get the most out of those types of relationships. And then finally, an interest in continuing education, just making sure that you are staying up to date with kind of current research. And in fact, we were just interviewing for a position recently, and one of the questions was specifically about how do you stay up on a particular technology, and how do you keep up with what's going on in the field. And it was surprising that a number of folks didn't have great responses for that. So I think kind of maintaining that scientific curiosity through your career is also something that's pretty important. So how are we doing on time? Okay. So as is probably evident in what I was saying, I've worked in both private and public sectors. There are vast differences between the two. When we talk about, for example, yeah, when we talk about things like pay, right? You know, uh, again, it's kind of highly dependent on the type of work that you're doing. I can give an example. When I worked for Exxon looking for oil, I can tell you that paid significantly more than cleaning up the oil that was left behind after a gas station has a leak. And so even within the private sector, there are kind of different types of work that you can do, and you'll find salary differences in that. I think as a generality, you could probably say that uh, there is more potential for higher pay within the private sector, and maybe in the public sector that's a little bit less. But again, it's also highly dependent on the job and the qualifications. Um, I mentioned, I alluded to this a little earlier, but when you're working in the private sector, a lot of it is about marketing, right? How are you going to get the next job in? You know, when I was doing environmental cleanup work, if you clean up a bunch of properties, then what did you do? Those properties are clean, so you actually have to go out and market it and find additional work. On the public sector side, that looks like grant funding. How are we going to fund our grants? How are we going to fund the work that we need to do for communities? So there's a lot of grant writing, legislative engagement, you know, talking to folks about, you know, where to get funding. Union representation is a big thing for me personally. In the private sector, a lot of times those are non-union represented positions. For public sector employees, a lot of times those are union represented positions. So that is a consideration. And then finally, capacity for advancement. I think that one actually varies more with the size of the organization. So if you work for a big engineering firm, you have lots of room for advancement. And then when you get to the top of the scientific piece, you can actually go into the management and the business piece as well. That's a little bit different for a small company. I know because I owned a little tiny company and there was no room for advancement in my company position. So, you know, it is, that piece is pretty variable, both within public and private sector work. All right. One. Oh, yeah. I mentioned this a little earlier, but state licensure may be required for some public sector work. So I would just encourage you, if you are interested in a career in the geosciences, you look at what any kind of licensure requirements there might be out there. Do you remember when the
OSBOG?
at OSBGE, Oregon State Board of Geologists?
Is it called OSBOG? I hear OSBOG, but that's.
Paul Edison Mom likes to say OSBOG. It's a little confusing. So the Oregon State Board of Geologist Examiners, OSBGE, this is one of the acronyms. It doesn't. It's not easy to say. They are the Oregon governing board that governs the licensure program in the state of Oregon. ASBOG is the testing company that administers the tests that geologists take. So it's a little bit confusing, but I'm going to be talking with Christine Valentine with the Oregon State Board of Geologists Examiners here in a couple of weeks about licensure. We'll go through all of that more information too. But I would encourage you, if a career in the geosciences is something you're interested in, look at potential licensure for wherever you're going to be. It varies state to state. There are different requirements. Decided the weather.
And that will be on Thursday, April 30th at 4 p.m. in Wilkinson 2 and 3.
Perfect. Excellent. Yeah, please come. All right. Yeah, here's one of our nice postcards. This was actually the picture, fantastic picture, was actually taken with an iPhone by our Geological Survey Services program manager of the of Turtle Cove out in Central Oregon. If you haven't been out there, highly encourage you to go out there. It is I don't remember all of the history behind it, but it's kind of known as the birthplace of Oregon geology. Lots of fossils. The colors are absolutely amazing. So but this made it into one of our postcards, which you see here. So this is again one of our outreach materials that we prepared. But yeah, that's that. The last thing I want to talk about a little bit is just kind of lessons that I've learned in my career. It's been a long time. Happened really quickly. Diligence pays off, right? So I started out my career really not knowing what direction to point in, but then by working, doing volunteer work, that's one of my lessons learned is that volunteer work really helped me to identify a little bit better, the direction I wanted my life to go in. And when I kind of realized that I had that community focus, I just sort of kept my eye on that. I mean, I would have to go off in this direction and that direction and kind of back and forth. But eventually I got to I mean, I feel like I have the coolest job in the world. I mean, I'm out like talking to y'all. I'm also out talking to communities about geotechnical solutions to climate change. Like, yeah, it's so cool. So diligence pays off. If you stick with things, it's really a long game, right? So it's about kind of your entire career and not necessarily about what happens immediately after you graduate. So just encourage you to keep thinking about it and keep working towards that goal. Um, be patient. Your early career is going to be a lot about that foundational experience, learning field work, regulations, learning the things in your field. So it's the type of thing that you don't get to fast forward through. You just got to do the work. So be a little bit patient. I mentioned right place, right time earlier, but again, I'll reiterate, yes, right place, right time, but you also have some control over that, right? So like if you were really passionate about oil and gas exploration, you would maybe do some research and find out that Houston was a fantastic place to be. And so you might think about pointing your life in that direction so that maybe you would end up in that place that is conducive to building a career in oil and gas exploration. So yes, right place, right time has a lot to do with it, but you also have control over some of that as well. So, and then finally, just be flexible and be open for different opportunities. When I started doing the volunteer work for the environmental justice works, I wasn't like conceptualizing it in my head that like I want to do a career in geosciences and how geosciences impact communities. It was more visceral. It was just like, I need to do something that is related to the community. Here are the skills that I have. How can I kind of utilize those skills to get back to the community? And I went all over the place with that. I've had a number of different jobs. I kind of went off in different directions. But eventually, by keeping an open mind and kind of keeping those kind of larger scale ideas in my head, I kind of wound up in a place that I is pretty cool. So yeah, it's exciting. It's challenging. Not all jobs are great jobs. I mean, even my job right now I love it. It is fantastic. I've got a lot on my plate. I'm stressed out a good bit as well. But I got here because I just sort of kept orienting myself in that same direction. So I just encourage y'all to just kind of do your own exploring and kind of make your own plan and kind of come up with your own story. But yeah, that's what I've got.
All right, well, I've opened up to questions for folks online and of course in the room. So we have time for some Q&A.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious about critical minerals and the use of lithium batteries. And so is Oregon in a position to have a lot of resources for critical mineral?
Yeah, so really and a lot of it has to do with the volcanoes and kind of just the geology of Oregon is actually conducive to the formation of more deposits for a lot of those critical minerals. So can you keep forwarding? Oh yeah, there's that one. I'll come back to that one in a second.
Okay,
keep going past because I think there was keep going. Not that Oregon, not that one. Keep going. All right, here we go. So this is critical mineral commodities that we've mapped out in our mineral information layer for Oregon version 4. So this will kind of give you an idea of where we know about critical mineral commodities in Oregon. And if you click the next slide, this is our plan for further evaluation of those critical minerals. So these are our focus areas. So you can see we've got some information, but we will also be continuing research in where those things are located. Now we're the state, so we don't actually do the production or exploration of those ourselves, but by having this information available, we can actually provide that to the companies or to the entities that do that type of work.
And folks can get these slides. I can email them out to you.
You can, yes, everything on here is you know what, let me let me double check just to make sure that none of this is proprietary information. I don't think it is. Most of this came from our website and different other presentations that we've given. So I will email you or I double check with that. But yeah, again, this is this particular image over here is the Milo database. It is in fact online. It's this piece that I'm not exactly sure of.
Oh, okay.
But that mineral information layer for Oregon is actually a map that you can pull up on our website and click around. And I think if you actually click on each of the individual dots, you can actually get some of the background information on that as well.
Was there anything in the slides that we skipped past that you'd like us to go back to, or is there further?
No. I think that these were just kind of extra information that I just had at the end of the presentation. If a question like that came.
Yeah, cool. All right, questions for Alex.
I was wondering if DOGAMI is considering doing any like student internships anytime soon.
I would, if you go back to the QR code, I would keep an eye on the State of Oregon jobs page. Everything, well, internships are a little bit different. Sometimes, you know, we've got researchers who work for the agency, and sometimes they have their own relationships with academic institutions and professors. So sometimes those internships kind of come through personal connections, but there are potential opportunities that will be posted on the website as well. So the answer is yes, we do them. Have to keep an eye out for them. The other thing you can do, so I've got up here, I've got some postcards for folks to take. This is the one image. These are packs of, I believe, 9 postcards in all. We've got our geologic map of Oregon postcard, and then we've got another bunch of images in there, stickers, and then that's my card. If you do have additional questions, like to email me your resume, I can pass it on to the program manager. That doesn't necessarily mean anything, but if you would like to email me, feel free to take one of my cards and email me as well. For the folks online,
well, they were part of the newsletter I sent out, and that's how they heard about this event.
Okay.
And you were copied on the newsletter.
Okay.
Where the DOGAMI is the top item. In fact, the email I sent earlier this morning.
Okay.
So, folks online, Alex's email is in that subject or in the CC of today's emails.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep. Anything else?
Yeah, do you focus on like natural hazards mitigation or that kind of stuff while like between mining? Is there any kind of combination or relation with those words?
Do you mean me personally or the agency?
The agency, yeah.
So as a geoscience agency, we actually do a lot of even across our different programs. So I mentioned earlier that we collect historical mining information. So for example, that actually some of that is like forensic, forensic investigations that happen. But that kind of combines, the two agencies, right? So a lot of times, our geological survey will find some mining information, and then we work with our MLRR program to make sure that that information is available to the public. Another area where there's occasionally some crossover is in natural hazards. So, for example, landslides. So we do a lot of landslide research, kind of using LiDAR to help us understand where those landslides have historically happened, where they might happen again, work with communities on that. But we also know that some developments like mines, actually, just because of the physical things that happen at those facilities could impact ground motion. And so we will have our natural hazards landslide folks actually work with our mining regulatory folks every once in a while on things. One final example of that, in just recently, a few months ago, there was a big rainstorm, and on the Malala River in Clackamas County, that's north. In Clackamas County, there was actually it's called an avulsion, where the river actually reached a former mine facility, and started flowing across the mine facility. So, that was another situation where this was a site that had been in reclamation with the mining regulatory program, but we needed to have our geologists and our fluvial geomorphologists, understand that help us to understand kind of what the ramifications of that were. So there's ample opportunity for crossover.
Mentioned on our phone call and other times we've connected that the importance of understanding statutes.
Yeah.
And the regulatory framework.
Yeah.
Is there a way that maybe one could use AI to say, hey, distill this into like some understandable language, or would it be better to dive into it in like, a traditional way?
Yeah, I can actually tell you that these summaries I helped, or I got AI help to
Okay.
produce these summaries. Like everything I do with AI, I actually generally completely rewrite everything. But I start out by saying, can you please find please review the Oregon revised statutes and Oregon administrative rules to find the statutes that establish the Department of Geology, and it came up, and I verified that information, and then I rewrote it a little bit, but wait, sorry, what was the question again?
Oh, just like using AI to help process like
Oh,
complicated.
yeah, particularly about statutes and rules. Frankly, I'll be the first to say that is very dense material. I mean, Oregon revised statutes, XXX dot XXX dot XX. I mean, it can feel really daunting and overwhelming. One of the ways that I became knowledgeable about that is essentially working in the field. So when I was doing petroleum cleanup, the state of Oregon has all sorts of rules related to how you do petroleum cleanup. So anytime you go to a gas station, actually, if you go all the way back to the second slide, the entire. See, yeah, that one. This, yeah. So this is actually a tank pull that happened in Beaverton. And you can see this nice gray area underneath here. So what happens is you go out, and if a gas station wants to change the capacity of their tank, so they want to reorganize the whole facility, they have to pull those tanks out. Well, there are all sorts of rules for how you actually do that work. And so you pull the tank out, you're supposed to take a sample at each end of the tank and on either side and then underneath. I like this picture because that nice gray stuff there is all petroleum contaminated soil. And you can't quite get the scale of that, but that hole's about 25 feet deep. And it was a big job with a lot of contaminated soil. Years of going through the regulations that oversee all of that is how I really got to know the regulations. But frankly, AI is probably a fantastic way to help get some familiarity with that. So yeah, I think the answer is probably a resounding yes. Yeah.
What do you do with the contaminated soil?
All sorts of rules about that too. So it's contaminated. Maybe in this situation, it was contaminated, I think, with both diesel range hydrocarbons as well as gasoline range hydrocarbons. It requires specialized disposal. So essentially you have to test it, understand what is there, look for a facility that will accept that type of material. They will probably give you a list of other things that you need to test for, and you just work through that analytical process of understanding what it is you've got and where you need to take it, and the best place to be.
Do they like burn it off or something?
It depends. Sometimes sometimes they bury it, sometimes they do thermally treat it. But that it is you thermally treat it, the hydrocarbons and volatiles have to go somewhere, so then becomes an air contamination problem, so it's this partially why environmental contamination is bad, it's nasty stuff and it causes health problems and you gotta make sure you treat it right, so.
So geothermal as an energy source,
Yeah,
is that something that Oregon stands to be able to leverage?
yeah, and that's actually something that the governor is pretty interested in right now, so we're working on kind of geothermal research. We're really just starting out that. Of course, geothermal, if you've ever been to a hot spring in Oregon, that is a geothermal resource. So we do have those resources in the state. They vary. I don't have the map in here, but there are places where the geothermal gradient is higher than others. But that is a kind of a burgeoning area of research and burgeoning area of interest for kind of decarbonization and moving away from petroleum as well. It's cool. I love hot springs, but I also love decarbonization. So it's geothermals are really cool.
Well, there's no questions online, and it sounds like in the room, does anyone else have any last minute questions? All right, well, let's just give Alex a round of applause. Thank you.
Yeah, for having this is cool. I haven't given a presentation like this. So.
Thank you for your time, and will you be able to kind of stick around for a few more minutes?
I can stick around again. Please take postcards if you'd like, stickers. Again, my card is there if you'd like to follow up with any information.
Great.
So, yeah.
All right, thanks to everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.